Can someone confirm that they can hear me? Can you guys hear the sound? Okay, I think you guys can hear me. Just going to mute. Can you guys hear the sound? Okay, great. I think we can start with the live. Okay. So today we are just going to continue. Just going to continue where we left off yesterday. So just as a recap, so yesterday we basically touched upon DEX formulas, and I think we did about 6 or 7 questions, practice questions for the exam. I'm not sure if you guys have any questions, but hopefully everyone can actually hear me now. Okay. So yeah, today is day 2. I think we are almost done. And for those that are going to be writing the exam, hopefully this actually does help you in preparing for the exam. So I will be sharing. I just need to figure out, but I think you guys recommended that I actually share all of this information via. I think it was a Google Drive or something, right? So I will be sharing that. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm probably going to add it onto the description. I think once I'll just update the description on day 2 of the video and just add it there. So hopefully it will be helpful for you guys. Okay, cool. Okay, let's say today it's day 2. So we've got a couple of questions. If you guys have any questions during the live, just pop them, use the chat, please, to just ask those questions. I think we can sort of work like that. So please use the chat as much as you can, as we'll be using it for communication. All right, great. Okay, so in terms of day 2, we're just going to jump into it. So yesterday we ended off at question 6, right? So yesterday we ended with question 6, and I think, yeah, so yesterday we ended off by doing the different types of joins, and then what we then did, we tried to break down the question just to give more clarity in terms of how you actually go about answering the question. And we looked at the different types of joins. You've got your inner join, you've got your left join, you've got your right outer, your full outer. It's very important to sort of like be aware of this, as it actually does help you quite a lot as you prepare for the exam, because they do ask you about those things, or they do try their best to actually test you to see if you remember any of those things during the exam. So it's always good practice to just keep in mind of those different items, right? Cool. So today we're going to start with question 7. I think as always, what I try to do is we need to understand what question we are actually answering, right? So I'm just going to jump onto it. So the first question says, you have a Microsoft Excel workbook that contains 2 worksheets, right? So this workbook actually contains 2 worksheets. We've got worksheet 1, which is going to be this one, and you've got worksheet 2, which is going to be this one. So you guys can see this is relatively the same type of let's say tables. The column name is the same, right? So you guys already know that it's either we're going to be appending or merging, but if the column name is the same, we're definitely going to be appending, right? Cool. Now you need to combine this two in order for it to actually look like this, right? So that's the goal of this actually, right? So you need to use the Power Query Editor to combine the 2 products from table 1 and table 2 into a single table that has one column containing no duplicate values. It's a very important keyword. You guys can see that we've got ABC and we've also got ABC here, right? So if we combine these two, we're probably going to have duplicates, but they have specifically said containing no duplicates. Very important. That's our first keyword that I'm actually seeing there, right? And the other important thing is that we can already see that these have the same column name, so we definitely are appending this. Which three actions should you perform in sequence? This is you will also get these questions during the exam. So normally ask you how can you actually perform, how they'll normally ask you to answer a question. However, you need to make sure that you are selecting the answers based on the steps that you would actually be following, right? So which three actions should you perform in a sequence to the move the appropriate actions from the list of actions, right? Let's see what options we've got. So they've basically given us these different options, right? So we can, so what you normally do during the exam, you just drag and put them here. And if you do not arrange the answers in the correct order, you will get an automatic, you don't get points for that. So it's very important that you make sure that your answers are in a particular order, right? So we can see that there's a couple of things, right? There's from Power Query Editor, remove the errors. From Power Query Editor, select table 1. Oh, you can remove duplicates. From Power Query Editor, match 1 and 2. Power Query Editor, import, and whatever from Power Query Editor, append. Now, if we go back to the question, if you already have an idea of what is going to be the flow of the answer, you can already put it on the chat, but let's break it down how we're going to answer this question, right? If we go back to the question itself, right, first thing that I'm seeing is that these tables have the same column name, right? So automatically anything that has to do with merging your tables does not work. If you guys attended yesterday's class or live, you know that we only append tables if they have the same number of columns and the same column names, right? We only merge tables if they do not have the same, let's say, column names and stuff like that. We just want to get certain columns from the other table and just add it into the existing table that we have, right? That's the only time you use merge. Now, because we're trying to get this into this is basically appending, because you take this table and just append this table under that one. So automatically, if we go to the options that we have, I think I just showed the answer. If we go to the options that we basically have, right, you'll note that there's something called, if you look at the options we have from the append, so already I can see that this is a potential correct answer. From the desktop, import the desktop, select OK, this is fine. But the one that says from Power Query Editor, merge table 1 and 2, already I'm eliminating this answer because we are not going to merge anything. We have to append. So this option over here is eliminated, and now we are left with 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Okay, I see there is already some attempts. Okay, cool. Now, if we think about this, they are saying you need to use Power Query to combine the two products from table 1 and table 2, right? If you think about it, if you were to combine these two tables, you would either go to Power BI and then you would import those two tables, right? Import table 1, import table 2, and put it onto Power Query, right? That's the step-by-step that you'd actually follow. You import the data sets, and once you imported the data sets, you then do what? You then, let's say, append the data sets. Now, because you are expecting duplicates, you'll probably then have to what? Remove the duplicates in your data, right? So that's probably the step that you're most likely going to follow, right? So what I'm going to do is to see, so which is why if we go here, think about it. From Power Query Editor, remove errors from the tables. We cannot remove errors from the tables. We haven't even added anything, right? Cool. So this one, we can't start with this one. From Power Query Editor, select table 1 and then select remove. I think it's a bit too early to remove anything before you even add the tables, right? From Power Query Editor, merge table 1 and 2. This is already eliminated. From Power BI Desktop, import the data from Excel, right? Remember they specified that this data is actually coming from Excel. So import the data from Excel and select table 1 and table 2. That is the first thing that you need to do. Because you don't have the data and your data is sitting in Excel, you want to import your data first. So I would take this one as my first step. You'll just drag it over here and put it there, right? So that's your first step. Now the other question says, so once you've got your tables there, what are you going to do? You're probably going to append those tables. Now if you look at this, the second option, other option says from Power Query Editor, append table 1 to table 2 to table 1, right? Cool. If I look at this and the other options, right, I think this is probably the best option that you have. So this is the next step that you'd actually take. Now that you've appended these two tables, what you need to do is, because if you look at this, they specifically say containing no duplicate values. If we were to append this to ABC and ABC would actually appear twice, but that is something that we do not want to do. And as a result of that, we basically then need to end off this by removing the duplicate. So select table 1 and then remove the duplicate. So if we check the answer, you guys can see that from Power BI, import the data, right? From Power append the tables, and then the last one says from Power Query Editor, select table 1, right? Because the first thing, you don't have the data, import the data. You've got the tables, then you want to append the tables. Once you've appended the tables, you need to remove the duplicate because you would have added them, but however, there's still another table that basically sort of like as a duplicate. So we need to remove those duplicates between that, right? So it's a very, very simple process. I was actually trying to see if I can demonstrate it over here, right? So if I remove, let's say, this. So for example, let's say you appended these two tables. You guys can see that there is duplicates in this column, right? For you to remove it, you just right click and then you come here, remove duplicates. And then that's how you remove it. So that is basically that final step that they were actually speaking about when they say that firstly you import your data. Once you've got those tables, you combine them, and then you come over here, you remove the duplicates so that you don't get any sort of like duplicates in your data set. Right? So hopefully that gives a bit more clarity to that question. So our best answer is going to be this and that. The other mesh is already eliminated. Right? Cool. Now let's move on to the next one, right? I think this one very interesting. I think we sort of like touched upon it yesterday, right? This relates to what we were talking about over here about the distinct and unique, right? So maybe just as a quick refresher to just go back to this, just to understand, right? So yesterday we basically spoke about this feature that basically says you've got distinct and you've got unique. So distinct is the number of records, and then unique is the number of records that appear once. So because over here there's basically, we were supposed to have 19 unique values, but however 7 actually appears more than once, right? Cool. Okay, see there's a quick question. Quick question, friends. Isn't that you append as new, and that would be table 3, and then isn't that you would select table 3 and then remove the duplicates? Well, in this case, that's a very good catch actually. That's a very good catch on that other one. So in most cases, what would guide you in terms of selecting the best answer, it's actually the options that you have, right? So if you look at the options that we have, you've got remove errors. This we can't use this one definitely. So the options that we basically have on here, we've got from Power Query Editor, select table 1 and then remove duplicates, right? So you see that the part where we have to remove duplicates relates to table 1. So meaning that we probably selected table 1 and then appended them, right? So the options that we have actually detect let's say what we can actually do, because we can already see that there's already some sort of limitations with the options that we have. So there isn't an option for table 3. So in this case, then we can see that from table 1, you import data from Excel, you select table 1 and table 2. So that's what they basically do. And then from an append perspective, table 2 to table 1. So this is actually the clue that we're actually given, that this is the, we still need to append our data, right? But the only append option that we actually have is this one over here. And it's saying that we should append table 1 to table 2. So they didn't append as new, they actually appended on the existing sort of data set. So the options that are here actually sort of give you that clue in terms of what options you have. If they added, so they could actually add a bit more complexity and say table 3 and all of that, but you just need to pay attention to the options and also the requirements of the question. If it was actually required by the question itself to say you need to append, you need to create a new table, then you're already picking up a clue that's giving you some ideas on saying that actually maybe you need to append as new. So that's a very important, that's a very good catch on that question. Hopefully it gives clarity on that. Right, cool. So I thought before we answer this, just for the sake if maybe even not everyone was actually there in yesterday's class, what I'm going to do is just to explain this. So if you remember, distinct basically tells you the, let's say, what is this thing? So distinct would basically tell you the number of items or rows that are basically in your data set. And then the unique tells you how many of them actually appear once, basically, right? So that is exactly what this is actually telling you. So it tells you that we've got 19 different records. However, only 18 of them are unique. So because only 18 of them are unique, we know that there is a duplicate. And if you look at the data over here, you can already see that 7 actually repeats. So it would have been 19. However, 7 actually is already a duplicate, right? This is very important, right? So now I want to see if we can translate the understanding of this into how we actually answer our question. Okay. Now, if we look at this question, it says you are profiling your data by using Power Query Editor, right? Cool. You have a table named reports that contains a column named state, right? So this column named state, the distribution and quality data metrics of the data and state is shown below, right? So from this, we can see that 95%, 96% of the data is actually valid and there is no empty records, right? Oh, there's zero error, but actually 4% of the record are actually empty, right? So that's what we're actually getting from here. And what we also get from is that we've got 69 distinct records. So there's 69 records entered. However, we've got 4 unique. So from the 69, only 4 of them appear once and the rest appear more than once, right? That's something that's very important to catch. So with that understanding, let's see what they're giving us. Okay, I think my mouse is not, my presentation just frozen. Okay, cool. Now, let's look at the options that we have. Now it says use the drop-down menus to select the answer choice that completes each statement on the information. So this is another style of asking the question. So they might give you a scenario and then they give you the different options and they want you to then select, let's say, the best possible answer or maybe the answer that they think would be best, right? Now let's think about the first question. This first question says there are, right, they leave a space, there are whatever different values in states including nulls. All right, so they're asking us how many different values do we actually have including nulls. Very important. If we go to the next one, it says there are, so if you guys already are thinking of the answers, please just populate them. Then the next one says there are whatever non-null values that occur once in a state. Very important keyword, right? Once in a state. And if we go back and just think about this, right? This 69 distinct could also include let's say null values because it's a literal count of the records, right? And if you go to the unique, so the unique, these are the ones that actually appear only once. So from this, I can already pick up that if we go to the second one is actually very easy to answer, right? They are what they are. So you need to select they are whatever non-null values that occur only once. What occurs only once is unique. And from the statistics over there, we already saw that there's only 4 unique. So the answer that I would basically select for this specifically, let me see if I can use a pen. So the answer that I would select for this one is 4, right? Because they're talking about none, null, and they also are talking about only the ones that only appear once. So this one basically relates to unique items. When they say different values relate to distinct, right? So different values would basically relate to the distinct. So therefore, I would then choose 69 for this one. So this is how they would basically ask you in terms of those questions. So you see, they give you a scenario and they want to test your understanding. I think this one is a little bit more straightforward. Sometimes they can even add much more trickier words. Let's say words that could try to confuse you to maybe think that maybe this is the correct answer or that is the correct answer. You know, they do their best really to try to trick you in the exam. So that's why they use words like none, nulls, values, and stuff like that. You know, because maybe if you got back there, you saw actually there's something called empty. Someone might start calculating how much is 4% of empty, and you just get confused in that state. But it's very important to just read the question and understand what exactly they're asking you to actually do. Let me just remove that. Okay, cool. So hopefully everyone is happy with question 8, right? Let's go to question 9. Cool. Then we've got question 9. So question 9 basically says, you have a Power BI model that contains a table named sales and a related date table. The sales contains a measure named total sales. Keyword. We've got a measure. So now we know that there's something going on here, right? So let me just rather use the pen. So this is something that's going to be key. So we've got a measure, right? A measure called total sales, right? Now you need to create a measure that calculates. So now this question relates to DAX formula. So if you've never seen a question relating to DAX or how they actually ask questions in relation to DAX, I think this is going to be a really good example for us to get an understanding of how they actually ask those questions during the exam. Right, cool. So you need to create a measure, right? You need to create a measure that calculates. For me, calculates is another keyword. Then they say calculates total sales from the equivalent month of the previous year. This is a very important keyword over here. From the equivalent month, same. So from the equivalent month of the previous year. What this means is that if right now we are on the 1st of March, we would then have to look for the revenue, whatever total sales, for the very same day on the 1st of March last year. And what I'm already thinking about, if you guys remember our DEX formulas, there's something called same period as last year. It's a very important keyword, right? So how should you complete the calculation? To answer, select the appropriate answers, right? Cool. Let's see what options we have. Okay, cool. So what they normally do with this one, they give you a DEX formula that is not complete, and they want you to basically complete that DEX formula. So that's how they basically normally would do it, just to check your understanding. So now let's think about this, right? We are trying to calculate something, right? So the sales on the previous year. So we're trying to understand how much was actually made on the previous year on the same month or same day, basically, right? Same period as last year. So sales previous year is equals to, now if you think about it, these are the options that you basically have. What are we trying to do? We are trying to calculate something. Evaluate would not work. I don't think evaluate would actually work. Then we've got calculate, we've got sum and whatever, right? So now let's think about this, right? We're trying to calculate something, right? We are not trying to maybe sum the total. We are trying to calculate the sales, and which is why immediately I think that this is the correct answer. Evaluate doesn't work, right? If I can do maybe a quick demonstration to show you what evaluate actually does. So evaluate actually has nothing to do with, let's say, doing any sort of calculation, right? I think evaluate is only used to do, let's say, basic analysis. I'm just going to switch to my DEX. Hopefully my screen actually switches. I'm just gonna say discard changes. Okay, I'm just hoping that this will help with the understanding, right? So you use evaluate when you want to get results from your table. That's what you use evaluate for, right? So evaluate is really good. Let's say evaluate top 100 music sales, right? So it's a good way of just getting results from your data. Then you just run it, and then it actually gives you results. So that is what evaluate would actually do. So I don't think this is actually going to help us in any way, because it's just literally, it's more like a select statement that's giving you a list of results. So we can't really say that one is correct. Sorry. So automatically I know that evaluate is eliminated. Sum is not going to work. What are we summing, right? Because we still have a formula that's actually continuing, so we shouldn't be summing anything at this stage. So with this one, I would go with the calculate, right? Because we are trying to calculate something. Actually, maybe let me just going to erase this. It's not looking so great. Going to use a pen. So we are going to select this one, right? So I'm going to say calculate, right? So we're calculating the total sales, right? Let's go back to here. What are we doing with the total sales? You need to create a measure that calculates the total sales. So this was the keyword, calculates. We already know that we're calculating from an equivalent month of the previous year. For me, that is a keyword. So if you look at the option, we've got date, month, or we've got date, month to date, right? This one honestly doesn't make sense to me. I don't think this is going to work. Parallel period. So parallel period would basically give you a period that would be sort of parallel to the date that you're actually working on. It's a bit of a strange one. And we've got same period as last year. I love this one. What the same period as last year actually does, it goes back to the very same period and gives you results of that very same period. And if you think about what we're trying to do, we're trying to understand how much money was made at the very same period as last year. All right, cool. Total month, this one would not work honestly, because we're trying to reverse our data to a same period based on where we are right now. So honestly, I would basically select same period as last year, because this is actually the best option in terms of reversing back and going back in time, right? Then the last part, honestly, we need to select which one is the most appropriate one, right? If you think about this, we are not dealing with date and month. We're actually dealing with the date, because they did not necessarily specify, so equivalent to month of the previous year. So normally the syntax of this would normally work with the date, right? So I would select evaluate, same period as last year, and I'll also select the date, right? Any questions on this one? Let's see. Okay, there we go. There is actually our answer, right? And if you guys remember, I spoke about just in case if you guys are getting confused in terms of how do I know why is it calculate. I think calculate was pretty obvious, because we are calculating something, right? We're not, let's say, summing. We're trying to calculate something, and we're trying to go back in time to the, let's say, similar period, right? The reason why I say this is very important, I'm just going to see if I can bring my screen. I'm going to take this. I'm just going to bring multiple screens, hopefully, to see if it actually helps with any sort of understanding, right? So this actually falls onto the time intelligence, right? The only way that you're going to know that this is actually correct, or the best option for you to actually choose, it's by reading this. So before you write your exam, it's very important to understand your time intelligence, right? Because they will be testing you with these things. So understand, what does closing balance actually mean? What is our like date end and stuff like that? And you can also read about the syntax. For example, if you look at this, it actually shows you how you normally write same period as last year or previous year and stuff like that. So all of these things are very, very important for you to understand. So you only get familiar with this. So if I go to same period as last year, they would basically give an explanation to say, okay, cool, this is what same period as last year, and this is how you normally write it, and you can see the syntax of actually writing same period as last year. So I didn't just magically know this. You just need to read about it and understand, what does start of the week do. If in the data they said they want to know how much money we made at the start of the week, that's a keyword. You're probably going to use start of the week. If they say end of the month, there's already something called end of the month or end of the year, end of the quarter, end of the month. So you already see those are the keywords that you need to pay attention to. Closing balance. If they ask you what was the closing balance, would they want to see the closing balance for the company? That's another keyword, closing balance, opening balance, and whatever and stuff like that. So the only way that you would know how to answer this is just by familiarizing yourself with basically these concepts, right? Hopefully that sort of helps you in terms of how you. So if you're wondering how they ask the questions in a DAX type of question, that is exactly how they'll do it. They give you the options and they want you to basically populate. The moment you hear the word calculate, you already know that you're working with a longer formula that requires some sort of calculation. Right. Hopefully that helps. If you guys can, please don't forget to like this live. I think it does help with also pushing the videos out there. So yeah, don't forget to like the live. Please just let me know if you guys have any question. Make use of the chat to just do that. So yeah. So now question number 10. I think this is another sort of like DEX related question, right? So I thought I should give you guys, let's say, more of a bit of a test on the DEX formulas. And one thing that I'll say with when it comes to DEX formulas, these guys tend to be very lazy. So don't be surprised if you actually see some of the questions that we work on in this actually appearing in the exam in the very same way. I think they tend to be very lazy when it comes to DEX. They don't add too many complexities. So even when I was selecting the questions, I sort of picked the ones that I feel like they love piggybacking on, and let's say the ones that are more likely to be repeated. So these are actually the most common ones that they might actually use as you're working on the exam. Cool. So question number 10, this is another question. Question number 10 basically says, you are creating a Power BI model, right, or report. Now, you have a single table in a data model named product, right? One table, you called it product. The product contains the following details. You've got the ID, maybe the product ID, the product name, the color, the category, the total sales relating to that product. Great. So now you need to create a calculated table. Very important. You need to create a calculated table. If you guys remember, a calculated table is basically when you're creating a new table from your existing data, right? That's a calculated table. That shows only the top 8. Very important. Now, this is a keyword for me. For me, that is a very important keyword. I'm just going to erase this. So as you're reading these questions, I want you to spot the keywords, right? It's very important because this is because if you, the way that they structure these exams, right? If you think about it, as a Power BI specialist, you'll be working for a company, and if you're working in the real life environment or in a corporate setting, context is important, and things what works in a certain project might not work in another project. So even the way they ask the questions in these Power BI exams or any of the Microsoft exams is to see if you're able to apply your mind based on the situations or the options that you actually have available to you. So that is how they, even the way that they actually test the question, that is what they're trying to see. So they try to throw around these different scenarios to see if you're able to pick certain words, keywords, because if someone says, I want to see the top 10 results, you already know what to think about. You already know what features actually give you that. So that's sort of like the structure that they apply as they're doing this Microsoft exams and all of that. I think it's really great because in the real world environment, though, you get different scenarios and certain things work depending on the variables that you actually have. So just pay attention to how they basically also ask the question. It's really just based on that. So now, very important, create a calculated table that shows the top 8 results. Very important. So top 8 results, product based on the highest value. It's another keyword, highest value, right? So they want to see the top 8 results, highest value, right, in the total sales. How should you complete the DAX expression to answer, drag the appropriate values to the correct targets? Now, each value may be used once, so they always do this. Each value may be used once, more than once, or not at all. So you may need to drag the split bar between panes or scroll the video, right? It's just instructions on how you basically answer the question. So very important things that we want to know our top 8 and we want to see the highest value based on the highest value, right? Hopefully that gives you some ideas. Great. Now let's go to the cool. What do we have here? So this is a type of question where they normally give you options over here, very similar to the others, still a DEX question, right? So you've got ascending, you've got descending, you've got relatable, you've got calculated table, you've got max, and you've got top. Now you see, this is where they start to trick people in terms of how they actually do this, right? Now they've got something called calculated table. Now, because you're thinking we're creating a calculated table, you might think that this is actually correct. So this is where most people will filter it out during the exam. They try to use words to actually trick people into thinking that this is a. So if let's say you didn't start or didn't understand this, you're probably thinking actually, let's just use relatable, right, or calculated. But let's read this. So we are trying to get the top 8 results, and this is our DEX formula. The DEX formula says top 8 results equals to. Now, if you think about it, what is the feature that allows you to get, let's say, top results, right? Ascending doesn't do that. Ascending is about grouping your data. Descending is also about like arranging, sorting your data actually. Relatable is used when you're trying to connect two different tables. You're trying to apply, let's say, a DEX formula on two different tables that are related to each other. So if you guys already have an idea what the answer is, please just add the answer over there. Right. Cool. And then the other one basically would be there is also max. Okay, I see there is max. I'm going to explain this one. Max wouldn't work, right? If you think about it, we want to get what? The top 8 results. That's what we're trying to get. Max would give you the highest value that you actually have, right? So max automatically gives you the highest value. So max actually, let's just do this. Max is out because we want to see a list of results, right? That's what we want. We want to see a list of results. Max is out because top 8, I wouldn't say it would just give you the highest value, right? Cool. Calculate table, we're not going to use this one, right? I get it that we're creating a new table, but for this to complete this specific script, we don't need calculate table. Relatable, I don't think we're joining any different tables and sort of getting insights from any, so this is already out, right? Cool. Descending or ascending, maybe you never know, we might need this later. But because we're looking for the top 8 results, max would not work. But if they said we want to see the highest result, that is when where you might have actually used max. But also this max is a bit misleading. There's different types of maxes, so you need to understand which max is actually applicable. So if they wanted the highest value, we're probably going to use max, right? But because we want a list, basically, you want to use top n. So the nice thing about top n is in makes x a recursive function. I'm not really sure. I've never used that one, honestly. I've only used the max one, but we can actually have a read of what the max this one actually is about, right? But we can go back to that one. So top n is going to, because what top n does, because it's literally saying top n, and you can get to specify the number of items that you basically want, right? The number of items that you basically want, because you want a specific number. Then specific number that you're actually looking for is 8. Let's say the top 8 values, right? So that's why I'm going to use top, right? Cool. Now the other keyword that I think is important to note in deciding whether, so we've got the top n, we specify how much of it, and we specify the table and the specific column that you're basically looking for. Now the last part, this is normally where you sort how you want to view your data set, right? So this is where you actually do sort how you want to see your data set. So we've got descending and we've got ascending. But if we actually read this, we can really see that on the highest value. So it's not really that visible, but from what I'm getting, we probably want to sort our data set in, let's say, from the highest going down, right? I think that's where we want to sort our data set in terms of that, right? So let's see what the answer actually says, right? So it says from the top n, right? Cool. descending, because we want to start with the highest value and going to the lowest value. I think that's basically descending. Yeah, I think that's descending. Cool. I think someone mentioned something very important, right? So we just want to check this one to see what the max x actually does, right? Like I said, you don't have to memorize all of this. There's lots of this formulas that I've never used. So let's just check what the max x actually does to see if it was actually going to solve our problem over there. Okay, let's read about it. So returns the highest value that results from evaluating an expression for each row. Okay, I see. So you see the problem with this one, it returns the highest value, not the highest values, right? So because it would return one value for us, it doesn't necessarily solve because we're looking for a list of numbers. So because the max actually only returns the highest value, then automatically it's not applicable. I'm now just curious what the max would do. Returns the largest value in a column between two scalar expressions. Okay, seems like they're bit. Okay, so max between purchase total sales, max extended. Okay, they seem very similar to me. I'm just struggling to understand what would be the difference. But in essence, I do not think that they would solve any of our problem because they would just give us one value. We want a list. And if we read about top n, right, top n, so you see, all of these things are actually here, right? It's just that the more you need to be really clued up with this Power BI thing and spend more time with these things. I think that's probably going to be the only way that you would be familiar with all these different things, right? It returns the top n rows of the specified table. So this retains the top n rows, and because now you can specify how many records you want to view, it actually works. So if your manager says we want to see the top 10 results, right? Top n, you can specify the top n, and it then allows you to actually specify, let's say, particular results, right? Max takes in a table as a parameter as max takes it in the column. Okay, that's a, yeah, I didn't know that actually. But if you guys think about this, right, the reason why top n does not actually work on its own is because when you say top n, right, you're not really specifying whether the highest or the lowest value, right? It doesn't necessarily, you're not really specifying whether you want the highest or lowest value. You're just saying, I want a list of, let's say, 8 results. But for that list of 8 results to be the highest values, you basically need to specify on how you want to order those results. If you order by descending, you start from the highest value and then you go all the way down. But if you start with if you use ascending, you're going to start maybe from 1 and then going all the way up. So that would mean that you won't really get your top results. So which is why the descending and the top n was actually very important. So top n specifies how many records you want, and then the sorting actually allows you to ensure that you're getting your highest to low, or you're from smallest to high, basically. So that's how you basically work around that. So you guys, hopefully this gives an idea on how they ask the DEX questions. It's not too hectic, but I feel like if you really studied enough, I feel like you won't really see any issues with actually do writing the exam when it comes to text family. Then they're not scary, trust me. It's just that you just need to relax and get comfortable with the different questions. Like you see the max X, I've never used it before, right? I've used the max, but the more you spend time in understanding the different things, I think the better you actually become at solving. So if they released max X, I probably would have gotten the answer wrong. But yeah, you just need to pass the exam. I think that's the good part of it. Cool. So hopefully that answers that part of it. So we are making quite good progress actually. So now we're on question 11, right? Cool. Let's do the basics. As usual, we need to analyze the question and see any keywords that we need to actually pay attention to, right? So you are modifying a Power BI model by using Power BI desktop, right? Cool. Now you have tables named sales and transactions. So basically we have two tables for ourselves. Okay, I'm just going to mark this. Cool. Now you need to create a calculated column very important, calculated column to classify each transaction as small. Okay, yeah, this is probably going to be a scary question. To classify each transaction as small, medium, what I'm getting here is condition. So there's probably a condition here, right? Yeah, my writing is not looking good. Condition. Hopefully this is condition. Yeah, so we've got a condition over here, right? So if you think about conditions, you're talking about and O, right? Because you need to classify. Classification is probably going to be some conditions and stuff like that, right? To say if it's small, allocate to that. If it's large, whatever, right? So on the sales amount, so you need to complete the code. So it's another classic example where they give you the code, but they want you to basically complete the code, right? Cool. Now, to answer this, you need to drag the appropriate values to the correct. Each value may be used once or more than once or not at all. Okay. I think this question is going to be scary, but I think I just showed you guys the answer. Okay. So we need to select the correct one. So this is actually the table that we have. Okay, cool. Happy with that. What happened here? Oh my God. I think we didn't have our question over here. I don't know what happened. Sorry, guys. Something might have actually happened to our question. I think I'll get back to this question. I think one of the slides is actually missing here. I think we'll get back to this question. I just need to figure out what slide is actually missing. Okay, sorry about that. I think let's just do question 12 for now, right? So I'm just going to check what slide is actually missing because we need to see what options we have for that one, but I can't see the slide. Um, Maybe let me just see if I can actually find the slide. Just give me a minute. Wonder what happened to the slide. Where could the slide be? Okay, I'm just quickly looking for it. We just have a missing slide. I just want to make sure that it's there because I think it would be a great question to have a look at. In the meantime, you guys can can just use the chat to add whatever questions that you might actually have. What slide would that be? That is really strange. Okay, hopefully I find it. Same period as last day, calculate, retain, date. Yeah, it's actually the classic corporate. Give me a second. Yeah, this is crazy. Date filter. Hopefully I find it. Yeah, because we have the answer, but I don't see the full list of script. Yes, the recording is actually saved. Oh yeah, there we go. I found it. So the recording is actually saved. So immediately so it's actually saved on my YouTube channel. So you can definitely still access it. So yeah, you guys can actually access the recording. Okay, I found the missing slide. I found this missing slide. I just need to see where I can actually edit. Uh, okay, cool. I think we are back. Okay, that was unexpected. I think this is what happens when you do a live. I think lives are very risky. I am learning the hard way. Okay, cool. I'm going to present again. Okay, now my presentation is not. Okay, we are now back. We are now back. Yeah, I just hope it is the one. Okay, cool. So we were just doing analysis on our question, right? So we know that, okay, we need to create a calculated column to classify each transaction as small. For me, the moment I hear classification, I'm already thinking about conditions or and stuff like that, and or and whatever, or if statements and all of that, right? Cool. And the other one that's also very useful for classification or separating certain things is filter, right? I think filter is another cool one that I always think about whenever anything to do with like classification or sorting specific things and just getting to view certain data sets. You'll also want to have filter somewhere here, right? So filter is another one. So you can actually read about what filter does on the DAX formulas. Right, cool. So I already know I've got sort of have a rough idea on what exactly I'm going to be expecting, but now let's go. I have to say, this is a very scary script. Yeah, it's not a nice formula to actually see in the exam, but it happens. So these are the options that you've got, right? You've got sum. If you think about it, sum is about adding numbers. I didn't see any clues about us summing anything, so not really sure about that one. Or we might use this one, conditions, right? Calculate, we could potentially use calculate, so I'm thinking that we could actually potentially use calculate. Filter, yeah, filter could be applicable and could be applicable all. Well, we'll see what the question says. Okay, cool. So this is the script that we have, right? And if you think about it, we are trying to classify certain transactions and all of that. So that's basically what we're trying to do in this, right? So if I look at this, right, we also got transaction size is equals to the var. So they're basically assigning the sales to this sales total. And then you add a variable filter. I think this one actually gives us a clue, eh? I think this was a giveaway. This was actually a very easy giveaway, right? Filter, and now you've got transaction, right? If you go back to this, hopefully this goes back, right? You need to classify each transaction. So already you know that the classification is more related to the transaction. And this actually gives us a further clue of saying the transaction size, right? If you wanted to do any sort of filtering or classification, you probably want to take filter and add filter over here. So I would take filter and add over here. And I think also this was a giveaway, honestly. It was a very easy giveaway that this is where you actually filter the segment, right? The transaction size value, so transaction size value, so you're filtering whatever segment and stuff like that. Transaction size value is equals to this and that, right? For me, it sounds like we've got a condition over here, right? We've got a condition over here. So you've got two conditions, this and that, right? I would more likely use the and statement because we have two conditions, right? There is nothing giving me a clue of saying, okay, so small, medium, or large. Okay, this could be another keyword. I think this one is a bit of a tricky one. I'm gonna be honest with you, because if I try to understand whether we're gonna use an or statement or not, it's very tricky between deciding whether we're going to use an or, right? So if you say, so we apply the filter on the transaction, and the transaction size is minimum, right? So you assign transaction size is less than total sales, then transaction size is greater than. I feel like an and statement would work, because an or statement, yeah, this condition wouldn't really make sense if you were having an or, because you're saying if the amount is, let's say, the total sales is equals to or less than the smallest amount, or the total sales is actually greater than, the or statement wouldn't work. But if you say it's probably giving you a value that's probably between this, so an and statement could actually be something that actually works. Just let me know if you guys are confused. So I'm just thinking, we've got a mean, right, and you've got a max, right, right. So you're trying to put this total cells in between, right? The only way that it can be in between these two ranges is if you put an and statement, right? So it should be an and statement to actually put it in between. It's a very tricky one, but based on my thinking, I'm just thinking that the only way, if you read this condition, the only way to put this transaction size in between is if you use an and statement. An or statement wouldn't really work for you in that. So that's why I would basically use an and statement there. Cool. Now the last part is very easy. I think this is where you're actually getting your results, right? So for your results, you need to, are you going to sum distinct values? It doesn't make sense. You're going to calculate. Yeah, we're doing a calculation, right? I feel like we are doing a calculation. We want to return results. So all the options that we have, the all wouldn't really work because we are actually trying to compute certain results. So I would use calculate. Please let me know if this part is a bit confusing, right? Because the reason why I would use an or is because we're trying to fit in this transaction into a range. The or statement creates it's either it's gonna work or it's not gonna work. It's really hard to classify something in a particular range if you actually use an or statement. That's why I wouldn't go with an or statement. Now we can check the answer. I think we've already seen the answer, right? Yeah, so filter creates a raw context over the transaction. So that's why I would use filter. And the and combines the mean or max boundary condition. Yeah, we wouldn't be able to put it in a boundary type of thing if we didn't use the and statement. Calculate applies the filter and retains the matching values, right? I know this is a bit of a tricky one. I think it wasn't too obvious. I think there was not so many clues, but you try to extract as much information as you can. And sometimes the structure of the script should normally give you, like, let's say, clues on how to do it, because you want to know at the end, you're probably going to be calculating, or you're going to be dividing something and stuff like that. So that's how normally you keep the calculate. This one at the top was very easy. I think we're trying to filter something out. So the filter segment was actually a clue or some sort of giveaway for us to actually know what we're about to add. So hopefully you guys get this one. So this is how they ask the DEX questions, right? They're not going to ask you to write a DEX formula on your own. They will basically give you examples. But this one, yeah, this one was a tough question. I don't want to lie to you. This one was a very tough question. So would having three conditions then let you use an or statement? I think so. Hey, that's a very good catch, because but it also depend on what, um if we had a median, if you think if we had a median, so a median, I'm just thinking if a median is basically in between here, right? Maybe you might have an or, actually you might actually, if you had three conditions, then you need to just reassess it and all of that, because how do you still put, so you would say this is between the minimum or the median, or the minimum or the between this and, yeah, actually if there was three condition, I agree with you, that would be all, because should end up with three categories long. Actually the, yeah, the three conditions actually would actually work. So I think it's who said, I think it was Debucho, right? Yeah, I think Debucho said something about if we had three conditions, because the thing about if we had, let's say, the median, hypothetically, if we had the median, how do you still ensure that the results are still within this range, right? I'm just thinking if you say it was between, if it was this, less, greater than this one, or less than this one. But if you do it the other way and say and, it wouldn't really work. So I think an or statement might actually be applicable if there were three conditions. I don't want to lie, this is a tough question. Like this one, this is one of those that you're like, yeah, let's just, you could just use the filter and just get the calculation, but the one in between, that's a very tough one. I don't want to lie. But either way, it's just 1 point. There's points that you're just going to give away in the exam because you won't really have answers for everything. But I have to say, if you see this one, if you're lucky, you see this one in the exam, just remember what we spoke about. Okay, cool. Okay, we're getting there. I think today we might actually finish a little bit earlier, which I think is good. Uh, Okay, cool. So the next question, so we've got this diagram over here. We don't know why we have this diagram, but we're going to find out, right? So the first thing that I'm seeing, we've got a sales table and we're still under DEX. So I made sure that I put as many DEX questions as possible so that you guys get familiar, all right? So this is probably the last question on DEX formulas. I think it should be the last question on DEX formulas. So what we're seeing here is two tables, right? There's a relationship between this table. So one date has multiple sales, so meaning that multiple transactions could actually happen on the same day. That's actually normal. We've got sales data, we've got COGC, I don't know what that is. We've got country date, discount. So that's the data that we basically have. So there's some sort of relationship between the sales data and the date, dim date. So dim date probably has data relating to the dates. All right, cool. Hopefully this is not another scary question. Okay, cool. This is a multiple choice. So they actually do give you a multiple choice type of question as you work on this DEX formulas. I think to make sense of it, when you see the question, it says small, medium, or large, so it would be one, two, three conditions. But since you're guided by the DEX, which yeah, definitely. So the DEX formula would normally guide you, right? So that's the thing with these exams. You need to, because you might see they might give you so much information, but you need to be guided by the options that you have. That's a very important one. So the options that you actually have, they guide you quite a lot. I think that's how you let's say catch on some of the things, right? So the questions or sort of like the options that you have, they sort of tell you what you've got and what you yeah. We can title this at the end. I'm not sure if they actually give an option for you to go back in your questions. I'm not really sure, but I think they don't allow you to go back and change your answers, but I could be wrong. Cool. But during the exam, you actually do get access to the learning material of Microsoft. But I don't recommend that. Only do it on topics where you feel like you have no idea what is going on here and you just want to refresh your mind. But yeah, it does take a bit of time. Cool. So now we've got three options, right? So it says the sales table, right? Let me just make sure that I can see. Okay, cool. So this says the sales table contains records of sales by day, right? From the last 5 years up till today, right? Probably might be relevant information, right? For the last 5 years until today's day. So it could be today. I like this question actually. This is one of my favorite questions. You plan to create, if you guys can already see what the answer is, you can just pop it on the chat. You plan to create a measure to return the total sales of March 2025, 2021, when March 2020 is selected. So this is what we're trying to do, right? I'm thinking that you're going to have, please draw, right? You're going to have two things here, right? So this could be, I'm thinking 2022, right? So what they're trying to say here is that whenever you select 2022, you want to see the revenue at the same period as last year. The clue is already there. You want to see the total sales on March when, because we're talking about March 2021 and March 2022. that's definitely same period as last year. For me, that's an immediate clue, right? Then they say, which DEX expression should you actually use, right? Because they want you, if you click here, you should be able to see the same period as last year. The answer is already there, right? So look at the first one. It says calculate, you sum the cells previous year. So someone could say this can actually work, right? So someone can actually say this could potentially work. Same period as last year. Now, I'm going to explain why I think this is not going to work. This is not going to work because same previous year as last year actually would say previous year, it's not going to go to be specific, let's say to a particular month. It's not going to be specific to let's say a specific month or anything like that, right? What that would actually do, it would look at the entire year. So this one actually looks at the entire year. So it won't really solve your specific problem that you have. Previous year goes to the entire previous year, so the entire 2020, whatever, but you want to stop at a point in time when you're calculating this revenue, right? So that one will not work. Then total year to date. Total total year to date could actually work if, let's say, today was actually the end of March, right? If today, so this one might actually work if, let's say, today was actually the end of March. But if you read this, they say records of the sales by date from the last 5 years up until today's date, right? So they're giving you all the sales up until today's date, but we do not know what today's date actually is, right? You cannot say, there's no evidence that actually tells you that today's date is actually the same period as March. But if today's date was actually March, maybe the total year to date could potentially work. But the other reason why total year to date might not actually work is because total year to date actually looks at, it looks like, let's say your company started in 1994. They would literally, total year to date would look at your revenue for the entire period. And if you look at this, we actually have data for the last 5 years, right? Because we've got data for the last 5 years, this eliminates total year to date because those numbers that you'd be seeing do not relate to the money that you'd have made. They relate to the entire period basically. So it could not be applicable, let's say, results. So this one is automatically out. Then this last one, honestly, it doesn't make sense. You're just summing everything. I think there's no context to it. There's no specific month or specific date. So this one is an automatic, let's say, cancel, right? So even this one, because of the different, if you read about the statements and the different things that could potentially happen, that's why that one is out. I think this one was very clear because it's same period as last year. So this will always go to the specific date that you specify in here. So same period as this and the specific date. Now, I know this one seems very simple, right? Because the options they've actually given us, they they are easy to pick out. I would say this wasn't really a difficult question. I think these are like the questions where they give you a little bit of leeway. But in some cases, what they might actually do, they might even give you something like a sum. Maybe they don't include calculate and they give you this statement on its own to see if you can actually determine whether what is the correct statement. So sometimes they could actually play around and give you different same period as last year options just to see if you understand if how is the text will actually written, is it written correct and all of that. So just be careful with that one. I think this one was easy for us because all of the other options were easy to pick up, but they could give you multiple variations of same period as last year. So be very careful when you write your exam and pay attention to that one. It can actually be very tricky. But this one, I feel like this is one of those questions where they just easily give you the marks if you just pay attention and understand what they're actually looking at. So this is very important, these keywords. If they had said year to date, then you already know total year to date, right? Keywords are very important. It's easy to pass or fail the exam. If you miss the keywords, no matter how much you studied, you will fail the exam. So it's not just about how much you studied. It's also reading the question very carefully because they do their best to trick. Like the exam is there to trick you guys. That's one thing I can say. The exam is literally, the mission of the exam is just to trick you guys into selecting the wrong, let's say, options, right? but you just need to be very careful and read and understand what they are actually asking. Because there's so many things that could have misled us in this question. But if you put into context and say, okay, what does year to date actually impact? How does it impact your data? Right? That's how you normally filter out certain questions and cancel questions that actually do not make sense. Cool. Okay, there is our answer. We are getting there, guys. I love this one. This one is my favorite one because most people do not expect this in the exam, right? And I think even the when I got it in the exam, it was a bit of a I wasn't expecting it in the exam, but when I got this question, I started thinking, how would you actually answer this question, right? This is a very tricky question, and you need to understand what does the error timeout actually mean in the context of Power BI, right? So I'm just going to try to explain that when you get a question that is asking you in relation to this error, so this is more related to the data modeling type of question, right? So I thought maybe before we look at the question, right, we need to understand what actually causes that error, right? So I'm just going to touch upon the key things that actually explain where that error actually comes from. So if you build a Power BI model, and let's say that model is there's too much data, right? The model is very, very complex. Sometimes, let's say you click on a particular visual, Power BI takes long to actually get the results. And if it takes too long, it actually crashes out. And when Power BI crashes out, it gives you this error, timeout is expired. And also, most cases, it works if you're trying to pull data from a database. Let's say you've got a direct query, and in that direct query you're basically pulling data from a particular data set, a database, and it's actually taking a long time for you to actually get that data to appear on Power BI. That causes an error called timeout, because Power BI has a certain time limit to when it can try to get certain data to bring it into your visuals, and if that takes more than 10 minutes, it's just going to crash out. I think sometimes it's even 5 minutes, right? So what causes that is these things. If there's too many rows in your data, if there's too many rows in your data, that's something that also slows down Power BI. If there's too many columns, that also slows down your Power BI. If your query is complex, if you've got, let's say, so many direct queries, and even your scripts are very complex in how they get data, all of those different things, like it adds so much pressure onto the performance of Power BI. Sometimes it's a performance issue with the source. Let's say the database that you're trying to pull data from is also very slow or doesn't have the computing power and stuff like that, that also impacts this and could result in that error. The other one is large data sets. If your data set is large, you already know what's going on. Now, with knowing this information, if you see any question in the exam that is speaking about that error, you need to understand that the error message is actually caused by these three things. So whatever solution that you will be providing needs to fix these problems, right? Either you're fixing the complexity of the query or you're reducing the size of the data that you're actually working on. So any solution that you provide needs to address these pain points, because those are the only reason why you'd get that error message. So if you do not have that context to say what does that error message actually do, trust me, in the exam you're just going to go blank. And I was very fortunate because when I was reading, I remember reading a particular section while I was studying for the exam, and it was speaking about Power BI performance, and I saw something relating to this error, and luckily I remembered actually this could relate to that, and that's how I was able. I got this question in the exam, very not exactly this one, but very similar to this type of question. So you see anything relating to this error, do not panic. It does happen, but what you need to do is understand what causes that and what do you actually need to do to fix it. And once you've got that understanding, trust me, it's going to be very easy for you to answer the question, right? So cool, now we understand that. Now they're saying while you're waiting for the data to load, you receive the following error, right? You get this error message. Cool. Now you need to resolve this error. What are the two? This is a keyword. And if you do not read this, guys, it's very important. You might select one answer and you move on to the exam, and that means you're actually going to lose a point. So always pay attention to what they're saying, right? I think with these exams, like I think with any exam, you need to pay attention to the question, read them as thoroughly. But one thing I would say, don't overthink them. I think don't find yourself spending so much time over analyzing a question. and then you end up wasting time because it's time. So just also try to be quick. But just one thing I would say is just relax, trust that you've started. If you've started enough, just be confident and just read the questions as much as you can, right? Do not panic to say, okay, cool, maybe I'm answering this, maybe I'm not answering, maybe there's something missing. I think, yeah, the over analyzing questions also can become a problem in the exam. I think that's also another issue. You just need to remain calm and, just take the questions as they come. Don't panic. Like panicking can actually make you fail the exam. I think it's another thing that's really important. Do not panic during that exam. It is timed, but just be patient and just read the questions as they come. So because here they say two ways to achieve the goal, right? So you need to select two. There's two answers here. So if you guys already have an idea, I would say just put the answers over there. I think we can just speak about them, right? Cool. So in terms of the options that we have, right? Two, we need to select two. There's two solutions. Now the first one says reduce the number of rows and columns retained by each query. I'm picking this one immediately because if we go back again, what causes this problem? Too many rows, too many columns, complex. If you see any answer tackling any of these points, anything to do with complexity of the query, anything to do with too much data, any solution that actually touches upon those keywords, pay attention to it and think about it. So for me, reduce the number of rows. This is already on my top list, right? The second one says split log running queries into subsets of columns and use Power Query to match the queries. This sounds like we're making, let's say, the query less complex, right? I think maybe this could, it doesn't make much sense, but it sounds like we are making the query less complex, right? So maybe let's keep it there for now. The second one, use Power Query to combine log running queries into one query. Yeah, you do not want to, because do you understand what this person is doing, right? By combining all these queries into one, you're actually making this a complex. You're actually increasing the complexity. So this is actually a problem for me. So this one is an automatic no because you are combining queries into one actually increases complexity because that one single query needs to do a lot of work to actually get all the answers that you need. So this for me is a red flag immediately. Now the other one says disable query folding on long running queries. This is actually bad advice. I think this is literally the opposite, right? And I actually prepared something regarding what query folding. Does anyone know? I think obviously there's a lag between my live and when I'm speaking, so maybe you guys might actually answer a bit late. But if you know what query folding actually is, you can just add in the chat, right? But I got something to explain before we get into the answers, right? Because I think it's important to understand why certain options are actually wrong. And trust me, guys, query folding is very important. If you go to the exam without understanding query folding, there are going to be some questions that will take you off. I don't want to lie, when I wrote my exam, I did not understand what was query folding. When I saw a question about query folding, I was like, I don't know what the heck this is. I just skipped the questions. I just guessed. I remember correctly when I saw a question relating to query folding, I just skipped because I don't know when, I didn't even read about it and I didn't even understand what the concept was actually about when it came to like a query folding. So I thought maybe I should just give you guys that privilege of understanding what query folding is really all about because I think it is a very important concept as you're actually writing an exam, right? So in essence, what query folding actually does. So query folding happens when Power BI pushes your data transformation, things like filtering data source instead of processing them inside Power BI. I folded. That's a good one. I actually folded in the exam, honestly. So, query folding is actually really good, right? Because you are taking away the processing from Power BI and putting it back to the source. That is good because you are putting less pressure on Power BI. But if you think about this, if someone disables query folding, that means Power BI has a lot of work to actually do. So instead of distributing the work to another system that could have the computing power, you are going to slow down Power BI. So in essence, query folding reduces memory usage and also improves performance. So this person over here is telling us that they want to disable query folding, you are just going to make the situation worse. Like, you're going to get more errors relating to this. So query folding actually is very important. If they said use query folding, I would have agreed that this question, that this is actually a potential answer. But you're saying disable query folding. Query folding, if you look at it, is actually part of the solution, right? Because it actually improves performance. Anything that improves performance, if you look at, there's another point, poor performance on the data source or whatever. If you're giving Power BI more space to do processing and stuff like that, it can actually process things better and all of that. So that's how I would think query folding actually should have not been disabled. We need to keep it active. So I'm taking this one out. And as a result, we've got two answers left. So this is why I think the two are actually correct. Right, so I added a bit of notes just to explain, right? If you look at the first one, question A says reduce the number of rows and columns by each query. So it makes smaller data set, meaning faster execution, right? Pushes filtering to the data, so it reduces load time, reduces time out risk. So these are actually solutions, right? The second one, split. So this one is breaking down a heavy query into smaller ones. SQL handles more smaller loads faster, then combines it in Power Query. So this actually reduces the execution time. So this is more, I think this question comes from the part where they look at performance in Power BI. And they love these questions. I think understanding Power Query is also very important. I think your understanding of what, not Power Query, your understanding of what query folding is could actually help you when you see these questions, because they love just pushing in query folding in terms of that, because it actually improves performance, right? And the other thing that I would say is very important for you guys to not during the exam when it comes to performance. I don't want to lie, they love the performance related questions on Power BI. Majority of the questions actually, I think the entire exam is purely focused on performance on Power BI. If you think about it, if you see most of the questions, they say reduce the workload, reduce this, minimum effort, and stuff like that. So they're always trying to see if you know the best approach to actually solving your problem. So that's the one thing I'll say about the Power BI exam. It's really about being efficient, right? Thinking about what is the best way to answer certain things, what is the best way to solve a particular problem. So, like, the more you write these exams, the more you start to see a particular trend in how Microsoft is basically asking some of these questions. So, very important to have your foundation solid in terms of understanding all of those different things, right? And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the performance part of Power BI. Let's see if I can, or if I still remember it. If I go to, I think I've got too many tabs open. Let me just do this. Right. I'm just going to see where is the performance. If I go to model, visual interaction, it's always, oh, optimize, it should be optimized. Yeah, performance analyzer, right? So I think another thing to note as you write your exam, right, there's something called performance analyzer. So performance analyzer is basically a place where you can actually see the performance of your visual, right? So this is the dummy data set that we're working on in this other class. So if you say start recording, right, and then you say stop. So this is actually a way for you to get an understanding of what is actually slowing down, let's say, your Power BI reports, right? That's what this actually does. So it gives you the information, uh, interact with the, okay, actually. So what this does actually, if I select start recording, when I say start recording, if I click on a visual, it records how long it took to actually do this and that and that and that, right? It's a way for you to test. So if you are, let's say, Power BI developer, and maybe your customers or the employees at your company are complaining that we're not happy with your Power BI dashboard, it's not working as well, it's not performing efficiently, it's not doing well, we're not happy, and then your manager is saying, what is the problem, what can we fix? You've got something called performance analyzer. So the way that it works, you enable it and then you click on any visual. The moment you click on the visual, it sees how long it actually took for you to get your results, right? So if you see here, it says the text box is probably going to be this one. The card, I don't know, probably that. I think the text box is probably this. The card is that. the sum of average by artist is probably this, and then the other one is probably that, right? So you can actually then go and and drop down, and drop down over here. So now you can investigate and say, what is actually causing this one, right? So if you look at this one, it took about 84 milliseconds. It's actually milliseconds. It's less than 1 second in essence. So this one took about, okay, this is very serious. And this one also took about 20. So you can see the one with the lowest performance is actually this one, right? Because what this actually tells you, it took about 216 milliseconds for, I don't know if it's even milliseconds, but I saw there's ms seconds, but probably is milliseconds. But you guys can just verify that. So what this is actually doing is that you can see how long it actually took for the Power BI to process and give you results when you clicked on that dashboard. And so based on this, if you look at this, majority of the time comes from this. So this is where, so this is actually called other. So if you're doing an investigation, other is where maybe there's an issue where it takes longer for your data to actually process. And if you look at this under other, you've got the copy of the query, the running of the DEX formula. So it gives you more insight to say what is slowing your dashboard. And they sort of do try to test you in the exam to say if you wanted to see the performance of your dashboard, what would you choose? You already know that you're talking about performance analyzer, because performance analyzer actually does an analysis of your let's say your dashboards as you click on them, right? But very important, you just need to make sure that you say start and then you click on a dashboard, right? So I think it does dynamically change if you then move on to the other one and then choose the other one. You see, it's always updating the numbers, right? Just checking what's the effect and what the impact. So this is more on the performance side, honestly, of Power BI, right? They try to test you if you understand what is the best way. You always know that queries actually do take up a lot of space, right? If it's like a DEX formula, a measure might not take too much space, but all of those kind of thinkings, they love those kind of questions. I don't want to lie to you. They want to see if you can actually build a very efficient Power BI dashboard. For them, that is the key thing, and they will always ask such questions in the exam. Okay, cool. So yeah, hopefully that I think today we might be able to finish earlier. So that'll be good. Yeah, there's another interesting question, right? I think this one, I wanted to skip this one because I think it's very similar to the question that we did yesterday, but I think we can just go through it and see if we still remember what we did yesterday, right? Cool. So this question says, you want to create a DEX, you want to create a data model in Power BI. The report developers and users provide feedback that the data model is too complex. Yeah, now these guys are saying your data model is too complex. The model contains the following tables, right? A one-to-one relationship. Very, very important. That's my keyword. One-to-one relationship between the sales and the region manager. That means one region manager belongs to one sales region. That's what this is saying. If there's a one-to-one, it means one sales region has one sales okay, one sales region has one region manager, and one region manager belongs to one sales region. So as a region manager, if you are allocated, let's say to Gauteng, you have to be in Gauteng. You can't be in some other province now, right? So that's what basically this is saying. Very key. So we know there's a one-to-one relationship between these two tables. The next one says there are more records in the manager. Very important. There are more records in the manager than the region manager. So there's another table here. The table called manager. So what this is saying is that we've got a lot of managers that are not allocated to regions. Because if you've got more managers than regions, that probably means that there's some managers that do not actually have regions. I think that's what it means. Okay, cool. Great. But every record in region manager has a corresponding record in manager. Guys, these are amazing keywords, right? I'm already seeing the very important keywords. We already know that in these two tables, right, a manager actually can be found in a region. So there's no manager that is not on a region, and there is no region manager that is not on a sales region. So we already know that we don't have any issues of maybe certain records not having something and stuff like that. But we already know that there's something in relation to this one. Okay, cool. There are more records in the sales manager than in the sales region. So more records in the sales manager than in the sales region. So that means they probably sales managers that are not allocated to particular regions. Right? That's what this is also telling me. Great. But every record in the sales region has a corresponding records in the sales manager. So that means you do not have a manager that is not actually in the data set itself, right? So for me, those are very important keywords, right? So those are important keywords. Yeah. What am I missing? You need to denormalize. Okay, you need to denormalize the model into a single table. So they want us to put this into a single table. This is probably merging. We are actually merging this data set. This is not an append because these data sets are not the same. So we are definitely merging, right? Keywords. Only managers who are associated to the sales region must be included in the sales report. So only managers who are associated with the sales regions must be associated. Okay, cool. That's another keyword. Which three actions should you perform in sequence to answer the appropriate question in the list? Yeah, this one is a shaky one. So we've got this. So these are the options that we actually have. I want to see, I think I added an empty place here. Yeah, I actually did. Okay, cool. What I want us to do is to break down this. I think it's always very important for us to break down the data so that we understand it, right? I always want to get an understanding of the different relationships between the tables, because without understanding the different relationships between the tables, honestly, it doesn't help you to answer the question, right? So, okay, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this information here. I'm going to try, what is this doing? I'm going to see if I can copy this. All right, let's go over here. And I'm going to, maybe in the exam you might have not have this liberty, but yeah, you must do whatever that you can to think how you're going to answer the question, right? So the thing is that I'm getting here is that what we're trying to do in essence, right? We are trying to say this is the sales region. So sales region has got the region ID and the name, right? Cool. The region manager, you've got the region ID and you've got the manager, right? Cool. Sales manager, you've got the sales ID, you've got the name and stuff like that, right? So we've got all of these different options. Hopefully it's actually visible to everyone. So we've got different actions, right? Merge. So it seems like everything is actually merging. So it would actually work. So there's inner join, there's right join, there's now let's think about this. Part of the question that actually says which three actions you need to denormalize, right? Denormalizing is something that's very important. When they say denormalize, they're trying to say include only, what is this thing? The records that you include should be relevant and they should be related to each other. So for me, this gives me a clue that we're probably using inner joins, right? Because also if you're going to be combining tables using into one table, so you want to combine this into one table, and you know that fundamentally, right, if you think about your columns, the sales region has a region manager, and then the manager has a region manager. So you know that there is no instances where a certain record, a certain parent record is actually missing something. So what I'm going to try to do is just to draw out this thing for us, because I think drawing out could actually help. But in the exam, you might not have this liberty, so you might have to think on your toes, right? So I'm gonna draw out this, right? So a parent table, definitely manager. If I see this manager for me, region manager, records and manager, we do have a table called manager, right? Cool. Manager is definitely a parent table for me. This is a parent table, so you prioritize this table. You've got a parent table over here, right? So you probably want to be starting with this table. Okay, cool. So let's see, you've got manager, sales manager, you've got region manager. Okay, we can have sales manager here. I'm gonna say sales manager. Okay, then we've got region manager. Then region manager. See, there was a question. So disabling means that no return error, just to push that. Okay, cool. Um, then so we've got region manager. We've got sales region. Okay, there's a lot of data here. So I'm just gonna sell sales region. This is a very tricky question. I don't want to lie. Sales region, region manager. So we've got three tables. One, two, three, four. We've got four tables. Okay, cool. So we've got four tables, right? My thinking is this is definitely a parent table. This is a parent table to the sales manager, right? This is definitely a parent table to the sales manager. Then you've got the sales region and region manager. So I'm just thinking if I look at the sales region, it's probably got a region ID. So what this is telling us, so the manager, so manager ID, the only other table with the manager ID is basically the region manager. So the region manager has a link with this table. Okay, cool. So we've established a link between those two tables, right? Sales manager, I want to check. So sales manager ID, region manager ID. Okay, cool. So the sales manager and the region manager. Yeah, these questions are becoming a bit difficult. Like this is a very tough question, I don't wanna lie. So you really have to think about it, right? So these are some of the questions that actually take you out. So from what I'm seeing, right? So the sales region has got region ID, right? So if we look at this, what I want to do, I'm gonna use different colors, right? Uh, I want to see, so for everywhere that's got region ID, right? There's also region ID. Okay. Okay, cool. So we've got this. There we go. So there's region ID. So region IDs will tell us which other tables are linked to the sales region, right? Cool. So sales region and the region name. So region manager's got a region ID, right? So what I'm seeing is that sales region. So sales region should be related to region manager. So sales region relationship with region manager. Right, cool. Which other one? So region manager, we've linked it. Sales manager also has region ID, right? So that means there's also a link between this and that, right? Cool. Happy with that. Uh, okay. But for me, what I think is the parent, when it comes to regions, the parent is basically the sales region, right? So I'm gonna call this P. This is probably a parent, and also this is also another parent. For me, this would be the parent tables because I feel like they provide, because this one would provide data from this one because they say that there is no manager that is here that is not found over here. And there is no region manager that is here that is not found under manager. So these are basically the parent, let's say, tables, right? Very important. So you need to establish which ones are your parent tables because it's going to determine the sequence at which you're going to be answering your questions, right? Because they are obviously going to give us an option that we need to sort of follow that sequence, right? Cool. So what was very important is that we sort of like establish relationships between those different tables, right? So I think now that we have um, sort of like relationships between those tables, that's a good starting point. Cool. So now if we were to combine these tables into one single table, right? If you think about it, we want to combine this into one single table. How are we going to do this, right? So I'm thinking the first thing that I would want to, we've got a manager, right? So I'm taking the manager. So this is sales region, and this is the region ID. Right, let's start with the manager one. So we've got manager ID and the manager name. I want to keep these two tables, right? And if I go, I want to see which other tables got manager ID, sales region. So if I look at manager ID, so region manager, so we don't need to bring in the ID. So if you guys look at this region manager table, we don't need to bring in the manager ID. We can just bring in the region ID, right, and all of that. So my thinking, what I'll firstly start by combining is the manager with the sales region. This is what I would do, right, without looking at the answers, right? My first one is starting with the manager and the region. And once I've connected those two, what I'll probably do is I would then connect this to, I'll then connect this one to this one, right? And then once we've connected that, then I'll then end off by connecting this to that, right? This is what I would do, right? I have to admit, this is a very difficult question. It's one of those. So I thought it would be really cool to actually see how they actually answer the stuff, right? So this is how they did it. So they matched the region manager with the manager, right? So this is also what we decided to actually do. So I think in terms of eliminating the questions, for me, the left joins don't actually make sense. So this is out, right? Because the left join, it's going to be a problem because they're telling us that there is no manager that is here. So all the managers that are here actually can be found here. So you probably just want to use an inner join. And it's the same for all the tables. So maybe in terms of eliminating the options we have, anything that is not inner join, I'll take it out. Inner join as a new query merged. Yeah, I don't think this is going to work for us. New query, okay, by inner join. I'm trying to eliminate as much as I possibly can. Um, but when I was writing when I'm writing the exam, I'm going to eliminate this. But the first one that I'd obviously do is to match the manager with the sales region, right? With the region manager, right? So they're actually matching this with that. So the first one, they match the region manager with the manager. They match the sales region to the sales region by using the inner join. And then they merge the sales region. So this is why they start with region to manager, right? Cool. The sales region to sales manager. And then the sales region to region manager. Sales region, right? So they're basically saying take the manager and merge with the region manager, right? Maybe let's see why would they do that. So the manager with the region manager, right? Do you guys understand why they would do that? The reason why they would merge the manager with the region manager, it makes sense because it's the only other one that actually has the manager ID, right? Because if you're going to merge these two, you want to do it with the ones that actually have the manager ID. So in terms of the data that I'm actually seeing here, matching the manager to the region manager makes sense because that's the only one you can actually match it with, because the other ones actually do not have. So we can't really match it with the sales manager, right? So that's what they start off by doing. Then the second one is they take the sales region to the sales manager. Let's see, sales regions to sales manager, sales region to sales manager. Let's see, sales manager. It makes sense, right? The reason why I would say it also makes sense, yeah, I think actually we should have used this to actually answer our questions than actually drawing an area diagram, because it's actually easy to pick up what's going on from here, right? I'm going to change the color, right? Yeah, this is a very tough question. So it makes sense because the reason why they're matching the manager to the region managers, because it's the only other table that has got the same key as the other one. And I think we missed it by maybe not looking at the table. So you want to match tables that basically have the same keys. So the first win for us is starting with the other table that actually has the same key as the manager itself. So I'm thinking that's what we basically missed. I think I think I've actually lost my connectivity. I think my connectivity is starting to get bad. Let me just disconnect that. Uh, yeah, the lives can be problematic. Okay, I think I lost connectivity. Sorry guys, I lost connectivity again. What is going on with these things? Can you guys still hear me? In the exam, actually, you don't get to break down the question. You actually don't get to break down the question like that, right? You don't get that sort of privilege. Um, okay, I think I am back. I'm just going to stop the video because I feel like it could be taking up quite a lot of speed. Okay, cool. So I think the mistake that we actually made was actually taking this approach, right? I think this approach doesn't work for us because I think the key things is actually the let's say the I think is these keys, right? Because the first thing, you can only connect tables that are related to each other. So in essence, the tables that we can actually connect the manager. So if you look at this, which tables have the region manager ID, right? So the manager IDs can only be found in these tables, right? There we go, manager ID. So then we already know that, okay, we can combine the region manager with the manager. So that's the first thing, because the manager is basically a parent table, right? That's the first thing that's important. And it makes sense why there's that region manager and manager, right? And inner join. Inner join because we know that for every region manager, you can find them on the manager table, and the manager table is actually the parent table, right? So you actually don't get to break down the question as much as we are, but I think for the sake of understanding, I think that's why we're actually doing that. Now, what other tables can we actually combine? So we know that there's two tables are actually linked now. Cool. Now we are left with the sales manager. The sales manager has got region ID, right? And we've got the sales region's got region ID, right? So in essence, we are left with the sales manager and okay, so these are the other two tables that we left with. So now we need to probably match the sales region to the sales manager because these are the other tables that actually have got, let's say, the region ID. Okay, so there's three tables of the region ID, the region manager and also the sales region and stuff like that, right? And you guys will see that they went to the sales region and sales region and sales manager, right? So they basically combined the sales region, right, to the sales to the region manager. Was it region manager? To the cells region, right? So they then combined this to this one, right? Hopefully that's the one. Sales manager and sales, yeah, sales manager. They actually didn't combine that one. I think my brain is just getting tired now. Uh, so sales region to the sales manager. Right? Do you guys understand why they can combine this? They can do this because this is the other one that actually has a relationship between this. So now that they've connected this, we still have the region manager, but the region manager is already connected to that one, right? So probably the last one is sales region and region manager. Then they do an inner join. I don't want to lie, this is one of those questions that I would just honestly guess because yeah, thinking about the order of how you're going to answer this question is really going to be very, very tricky. Let me see if they want actions, if they want it in an order. Which three actions should you perform in sequence? Yeah, you see, this sequence thing was actually going to, I was probably going to get the first one because I would start with the parent one and probably the second one if I did a good analysis of the question. But yeah, this is one of those questions that are very, very difficult. But I think the best way to answer this question was to look at which ones has the same keys and also prioritize starting with the parents. Because you can see they started with the parent, which is the manager, and the cells region is also a parent, and also this is also another parent table. So they always try to prioritize the parent tables basically. But yeah, it's a very tough question. Hopefully that helped with the kind of thinking. So you want to pick as much points as you possibly can. That's one thing I can also say. So if you see that a question is very difficult, I'd say rather just skip that question because it's going to be a massive issue. Okay, anyone feeling a bit confused about that question? I know it was a tough one. You get those tough questions in the exam. I don't want to lie. The PL exam is not as easy. Like trust me, the work that we do using Power BI is not as crazy as the exam. I think the exam is a bit extreme than what you'd ever experience as a data professional writing these things. Cool. I think this is probably the last question, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's actually the last question. So we are actually on the last question. So don't worry, guys. We are almost there. We are almost there. I know it's a Sunday. We are almost there. Okay, cool. So now let's look at this question. So the next question, the reason why I added this question, it touches upon something important, which is around row level security, right? So row level security is a very important question. Hopefully you guys can still hear me. I'm just double checking if the live is still active. Okay, I think it's still active. Cool. So row level security, this is more around the management of assets, right? It's probably the last section as you're working on your Power BI exam, and they love this question. I can guarantee you, if you copy this question as it is, you might actually see it in the exam. I don't want to lie. This question always appears in the exam. It appears without fail. They will always ask this question no matter what. Because I wrote the exam twice and they asked me the very same question twice. I was like, actually, they genuinely love asking about this question. So if there's one free mark that you might want to just grab for yourself, it's probably going to be this one, right? But there is a bit of context. It changes depending on the context, but luckily I thought about the different ways they might ask you a question, and I actually did edit so that you guys would have a better chance at actually passing it. If you already have an idea of what would be the correct answer, please just pop it on the chat, but we can just go through it. Okay, cool. Row level security. So you have a Power BI model that contains a table named employees, right? The table has the following columns. You've got the employee name, the address, the start date, and the job title. Very important. Those data sets tell you what you can actually do. Now, you are implementing a dynamic. You see, this is a keyword. The moment you hear this word dynamic, I'm trying to see if I can see my. For me, this is the biggest. Once you see this dynamic, right? When you see the word dynamic, right, they are saying we want a way of actually doing this once and having to never do it again. We don't want to manually add, let's say, access, whatever. So you probably know that they want to write some sort of script or whatever, and you want to use the best possible way to actually do it. Right? Cool. So they want something dynamic. That's the most important keyword. Implement a dynamic row level security. You need to create a table to filter to meet the following requirements. The users must see only their own employee data. So what this actually does, maybe before we actually get into this question, right, is maybe we can dive into what this is relating to. So in Power BI, there's something called security. Now, if you guys think about this, when you build a Power BI dashboard, let's say I build a Power BI dashboard for my company, right? And that dashboard has got finance data, how much my let's say people that actually work for me are actually earning, how much the HR department is earning, how much the finance people are earning. That is very risky. So Power BI introduced something called row level security and column level security, right? So row level security is about implementing, restricting people access to certain rows, and column level security is about restricting people access to certain columns, right? So we can start with row level security. So what exactly is row level security? So row level security is really about, it controls which rows of data a user can actually see. So this is where you try to control which rows a user can actually see. So you can actually filter this based on the user's identity or based on a person's role or department, right? If you want to say maybe says someone is not supposed to have access to something, you can filter by, because think about this, you could have someone in a particular department that should not be able to see something. So maybe filtering, separating people by department might not actually work, because not everyone in that particular department should have access to certain things. Maybe certain people in that department should have access to it. Then the context actually changes. Or you want to restrict based on the role. Are you a junior analyst? Are you a senior analyst? Are you a supervisor? Are you a partner? You want to implement those security controls based on those different things. Department and region. Are you a region manager for KZN? Are you a region manager for whatever province, and stuff like that? So you want to restrict people access to certain things. Now, what I put together here for you guys is the different ways of actually applying those three different filters. Because in the exam, if they say filter by the department, you are going to use this one. This is the one that you most gonna, if they say filter by department, you must switch and use this one, right? If they normally say dynamic without specifying anything, they want you to use this one. If they just say dynamic and they don't add whether by department or whatever, it's already a clue for you that actually you need to use this one. If they say department, then it's a much more complex text formula. I say department in, you do calculate, you specify the department, the email address, because now certain people maybe in whatever, so this one becomes much more complex, right? Um, so that's another thing very important. So if they just say dynamic, this is the most dynamic way of actually doing this thing. You can restrict people based on the email. But if they say they want you to restrict it based on the department or whatever and stuff like that, it gets complex, and sometimes it's by region, it's by this. You can have much more complex. But I want you to pay attention that it's not always this. This is not always the solution. It depends on what you're trying to do. So I just got this different, let's say, options you might actually have, and sometimes each of them could be applicable depending on what you want to do. Something very important. The last one is called column level security. So this one controls columns or users access can actually see. So it's high sensitive columns. I think this one is very straightforward. So if they, another thing that they might actually ask you in the exam, right? They might say, you've got certain people in your company and you don't want them to get access to certain columns. If you don't want people to have access to certain columns, it's very easy. They're talking about column level security. If they say you don't want certain people to have access to certain roles, you know that they're talking about role level security. So in the exam, the different ways that they might actually test you on this one, it's either by giving you a scenario and asking if you're gonna use column level security or row level security. What's important to understand is that row level security protects at the row level, but it doesn't cover columns. But column level security would then cover you at a column level. So they will test you based on those two things. Or they might actually test you based on saying, if you want to implement something that's dynamic and whatever, you're going to use HR. But those are the only formats that they normally ask this question. Testing your understanding of the difference between the two and seeing which one could be the best solution in the exam. So you just need to understand the limitations of each, understand what row level security covers, and understand what column level security actually covers. Very important. So I thought I should just cover this one, right? So now we have this understanding. I think I just exposed the answer, but it's fine. So now they're saying you need to create a filter to meet the following requirements, right? Cool. A user must see only their employee data. You want a user to actually see their employee data, right? The DAX expression must work in both Power BI and Power BI services. Now, we've got email address, username. This one, yeah, this thing, I don't know. I don't know about this one. I don't want to lie to you. I've never seen, so this one is a complete out for me. I think this is not going to work for us. I'm going to be honest. Let me just do this. Right. So first option that we've got, email address, username. No, we don't do that. The second one, employee, we don't do that. Do not use employee name. What if someone is the same employee name, right? It's not going to work. So I think that one is also very problematic. Then you've got employee name and user equals to. You see, This one's actually had these lines, right? You don't do these lines. You want to have an equal sign. So the first thing that also could take these ones out is the syntax. The syntax is incorrect. You want to have something that's saying equals, because you can't say employee address, then you add a line, then say username. What does this actually mean? But this one, you're saying employee name is equals to username. Maybe this one could work, but we don't have anything like this. You can implement this, but yeah, this actually doesn't make sense. Then the last one actually makes sense. So this is the one where you say address is actually equals to the principal name. So this would be linked to your email address. So whatever roles that they build, and if they say your email address could only get access to this, you choose this. Now, if they change the context of this, they say you're implementing a dynamic row level security, but you need to filter by the department. This was going to change, the context of this was going to change and go to department, right? So it's very important to understand that as much as this is correct, and maybe in most cases this is the one that you're going to select, but if they change and say department, the context has to change also. So that's also something that you need to pay attention to, right? So hopefully that actually clears out why this is the correct answer. So requirements, address, username, right? Users must see only their employee data, must work in Power BI and desktop, right? So yeah, that's it. Cool. I promise you guys, this is actually the last slide. So just hold on a bit. This is actually the last slide. We've come to the end of this crazy program, but let's see how we do it. So I think the last thing that I thought we should cover, right? This they love testing this in the exam, guys. So you need to understand is that when you publish your Power BI dashboards, right? You need to know the different workspace roles. So on Power BI, the moment you publish your power your assets and whatever, there is certain roles that are actually allocated to these let's say these assets. So as a manager of a Power BI dashboard or whatever, you need to make sure that you're allocating the right rights, right? Firstly, there's something called a viewer. So a viewer is basically the viewer role is the most restrictive role in the workspace, right? So users with this roles can only view and interact with the content, such as reports and dashboards, but not make any changes. In the exam, they will ask you that you built a dashboard, whatever they can create whatever scenario and story, and they say you need to give access to this group of people, and this group of people should only be able to view the report, nothing else. And they will give you a list of roles. They will ask you which role do you think is the best one to choose. If they say people should have the least access or the least privileged access, you know that the viewer is the best one, because these people should not be able to edit. So that's the time where you might select the viewer role. Cool. The next one is the contributor. The contributor role allows users to create, edit, and delete content within a workspace. That's a very key word, within a workspace. So whatever workspace that you would have allocated these people in, that's where they can only do all those activities. So they can only do work that they have actually been allocated to. So that's what this one actually means, right? It's very important. So within such as reports, semantic and stuff, whatever. So anything outside of that, they cannot meddle with it. They can't do anything outside of that. So if in the exam they ask you that you need to add someone to your team, and they only need to be able to modify, they must be able to let's say create, delete, and whatever, right? Then you want them to do it. If they say this user should not be able to add other people, then you already know that the contributor also, as a contributor, you cannot add other users. The role does not allow you to actually do that. You can modify things, but you can't bring in your team or anyone that you love working with into the workspace. You do not have those privileges, right? So think about what problem you're trying to solve and what is actually required. Now, the third type of user is the member. Now, the member role provides you all the permissions of a contributor. So whatever the contributor can do, remember the contributor can create, delete, and edit content. So as a member, you can do all of those things with the added ability to change the workspace settings and assign roles to others. So what this one does, it gives you the privilege to actually change the settings and add anything additional. Now, in the exam, if they ask you that there is a user that you need to add, and this user needs to be able to delete, edit, and they also need to be able to assign roles to users, you know that they are talking about the member. But if they say you should not be able to make any changes to the workspace or anything, immediately you understand that you are talking about a contributor, right? Very important to understand the distinction. They will ask you this. I promise you in the exam, if you go writing the exam this week or next week, you will see this question. They will definitely ask, I can bet on this one. They will ask you something in line of this. Because this is a very important part when it comes to publishing this text. So this one, the reason why I added the notes here, because I know for sure that they will ask you something in relation to this. So you just need to understand the differences between those users. The moment you don't understand the differences between those users, that's when it becomes blurry. The last one is the admin. Now the admin can do anything. Like this is the person that can literally do anything. Like there's nothing that they can't do. I think that's one thing to note, right? So the admin role grants you full control over the workspace. Admins can perform all actions, including managing permissions, deleting the workspace, and assigning roles. So these guys can do anything. So you like if you're gonna give someone this privilege, you need to have justification. You can't just randomly give people this type of access without any justification, right? Unless you are the creator of the platform and you by default obviously you'd have that kind of access, right? But very important to understand the viewer can only look at things, nothing more. The contributor can contribute, right? They can edit, they can do that, but they can't assign new roles, they can't delete people. The member, they have everything that a contributor can actually do, but on top of that, they can actually change the settings, but they cannot delete the workspace or anything like that. Then the admin can do literally everything and anything that they basically need to be able to do. So yeah, in essence, hopefully this was valuable. I know you guys might think that we covered maybe a few questions, but trust me, I selected these questions strategically because I believe that they cover some of the common things that you're going to be seeing in the exam. And just one question that we've covered here could sort of cover, let's say, 3 or 4 other questions that you might actually meet in the exam. So some of these things I think are going to be very important for you guys to make note of. I'm not sure. I think some of you have already purchased my study guide, whatever. So I do have a study. It's more like study notes. I think it's more like your study notes if you want to prepare for the exam, whatever. You can just check it in my store. I think everything is on my link tree and whatever. But what I'm going to do is that once everything is ready, I'm going to upload these notes and I'm just going to add this onto like a Google Drive. So it's going to be in the description of the video. So I might edit tomorrow, let's say before the end of tomorrow. So you can just come back and just check this video and see if on the description I've actually added this specific link. But yeah, hopefully this was useful for you guys. I know that maybe the time wasn't enough, but it does really take a lot actually to prepare for this type of exams. So I genuinely wish you guys all the best. It's not an easy exam. Honestly, I've written a lot of exams for Microsoft, and I feel like this is the most difficult exam. Even the data scientist was not as difficult as this one. This is a very difficult exam. I'm gonna be honest with you. It's probably the most difficult Microsoft exam you'll ever write. And you guys are taking a very important step in preparing and actually writing this exam. I think it is an amazing exam. So yeah, guys, all the best in this exam. I'm sure you guys are gonna do well. So yeah, thank you for attending my session. I think this was the first time I'm running live, so I do appreciate the consistency and the comments and all of that. It really does go a long way. So if you like this video, just like it. I think more people could be able to see this. It's also recorded, so it's going to be available on my YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. But that's it from me, guys. Any questions? Okay, that's good to hear. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. All the best with your exams. I'll see you guys on TikTok or during class, wherever. But yeah, I wish you guys all the best.